Welcome to this Autodesk Factory Design Suite 2015 What's New presentation. My name is Rusty Belcher and I'll be working through the presentation with you today. Now there are many enhancements to the 2015 release of Autodesk Factory Design Suite, and I have a list of the main ones up on the screen. And during our presentation today we'll be focusing on the bullet points in this list. One of the main enhancements for Factory Design Suite, the 2015 release, is the integration of the Process Analysis 360 tool, and we'll be taking a very close look at that. We can now actually publish 2D assets directly from AutoCAD, and we'll take a look at that process as well. There's now full support for hyperlinking in our asset tags, and there's a brand new asset constraint command that you can use when your assets have so many connectors that you have trouble actually getting the right connector to snap in place. There's now new support for elevated assets, and especially how elevated assets are handled when you project the footprint back to the factory floor. Some of the enhancements that we're going to be taking a look at today are actually Inventor enhancements, like the point cloud management and navigation. Now, this is such a fantastic addition to Inventor that it really makes our Factory Design Suite process much easier. So we'll be taking a look at that today as well. We can now place assets directly on point clouds. And this is actually introducing a new workflow where some of our assets can actually now be generated as wall-mounted assets. Assets are now fully supported in the bill of materials, and we can get all of those key parameters that we use to change the sizes of our asset to show up now in the bill of materials. There's new project mapping options and layout template options. When you sync from AutoCAD back into Inventor, certain project files will be honored no matter what, as well as a layout template will be used no matter what the current state of Inventor is. And there's now new support for FactoryCAD. We can now utilize FactoryCAD as a DWG overlay, and we can now import models generated from FactoryCAD into Inventor. The first enhancement we'll be looking at today is the integration of the Process Analysis 360 application. Process Analysis 360 allows you to quickly build a functional model of your proposed assembly line, factory, or machine layout and simulate its operation, identifying potential bottlenecks and optimizing performance. And the way I like to look at it is it allows me to start my factory design by designing the flow first. You'll find that the Process Analysis 360 tool is fully integrated into all of the Factory Design Suite applications. I'm going to open up my Inventor application here, and new on the Factory ribbon is the presence of the Create Process Model command, which actually launches the Autodesk Process Analysis 360 application. If I opened up my AutoCAD application, you'll actually see access to Process Analysis 360 here as well. And if I start the Launchpad for Factory Design Suite, you'll see that it's actually possible to launch a Process Analysis 360 application directly from the Launchpad. So the application is fully integrated into the Factory Design Suite. Now for our demonstration, I'm actually going to open Process Analysis 360, and we're going to begin the footprint of a layout in this application during the demonstration today. Now, if you've never used Process Analysis 360, this is a fantastic tool for generating a simulation of what your potential layout would look like and how it would flow. Now, I'm going to start by clicking New, and I'm just going to do a sample first. We'll click OK. The application launches and is basically a blank screen. Now we have the ability to add source objects, processor objects, buffer objects, and product objects to the flow. Now I'm going to begin a simple layout here for the presentation today, and we're going to start with two sources. These two sources are going to feed two processors. The two processors will send their data to a buffer, and the buffer will feed another processor. And then eventually from that processor we'll get to our end product. And the tool allows me to connect these points very easily. So I can connect a point there from the source to the processor number 1, from the source to processor number 2, and also we can cross feed here, so both of these sources will feed these processors. Both of these processors will feed the buffer will feed this processor, and then we'll finally end up with feeding our actual palette of product at the end. Now I've jumped over into another version of the same flow, and I've actually done some more work here. I've actually identified each of the sources, the processes, and the buffers, and even the products as well. And I've added some information. If you select these objects, in the Properties window on the right, you can actually see how in this case, the feed is going to be visualized in the flow. And in this case, I have it set up just as a blue feed. It's important to remember at this point that this flowchart is conceptual. So the product coming out, or the source coming out of this particular object, is going to be represented by a blue ball. And you can see, for instance, it has an output rate of 10 objects per minute. Same thing here, we have what I call a yellow feed, and it's going to be represented by a yellow ball. And again, 10 objects per minute is the flow rate. Now each of these are going to go into 2 processors, and I've identified these as presses. And for this particular press, you can come in and see that, for instance here, this is going to be a merge operation where it takes a blue and a yellow. It actually takes 1 blue and 2 yellows, and then it outputs what's going to be an orange star. And really, the second press here is just to back up press A. It does the same exact thing. Now our process will then feed a buffer rack. So we'll take these objects, store them on the rack, and then they will feed another press I have identified as C. Now the operation here takes a little bit longer, and the export from here will be visualized as a green star. And finally we end up with a product. Our target quantity will be 20 objects. And I'd like to see how long that's going to take. So I'm going to start the simulation, and you can actually see the blue and yellow dots coming into the processor. You'll see the orange stars going into the buffer rack, and you'll see them being processed as a green star and actually being sent over to the palette. Now a couple of things that you can focus on here, you can actually see that our buffer is actually filling up. And if I select the buffer, you can see, for instance, its capacity thresholds. So its minimum is 20 objects, its maximum is 80. Well, I'd like to see how long it's going to take to actually run the system until I get 20 objects as far as the end product. And we can come here to the little timeline, and we can pull this over to the right, and we can make time proceed faster and faster. So what I'm looking for here is any potential bottlenecks. I'm really worried that, for instance, my rack is going to get filled up to the point where we actually violate one of our thresholds. So I'm seeing here, as I'm approaching 15 or 16 objects, all of a sudden my rack turns red and gives me a warning that, hey, you have a potential bottleneck here. But we can see that we finished up just fine. I got 20 objects, and everything worked nicely. Anytime I want, I can generate a report of the simulation. We'll go ahead and look at the report very quickly. We can see all the information we input prior to the simulation. We can see how the presses were used. In this case, 2 of them were about 50%, 1 of them was about 100% used or utilized. We get a report on each of the processors. We also get a report as far as the buffer is concerned, and even the connection points, those little lines that connect the feed object to the processor, those represent transportation, and we can actually see how that is affected as well. Now I'm going to reset the simulation, and I want to see if we can do something a little better. Simulation revealed to me that it took about 41 minutes to get 20 objects through the line, and I want to see if there's something I can't do to improve that. Well, one of the things I think I can identify real quickly is that my bottleneck seems to be right here, this particular press. Well, I can right click on this and select copy, and I'm going to paste just basically a copy of this press into the system. So let's imagine that we would buy a second press and then add that to the line. very quickly, I could come down and we'll use the buffer here to feed this, and this will feed my end product as well. So I can start the simulation again, this time running it very fast, and we'll see how long it takes us to, again, to generate 20 objects. At any given time, you can actually come over and simulate a failure in one of your devices. So in this case, I want to simulate what one of the first presses falling out of the process would do to the overall simulation. And you can see that even with this press falling out, you can see that we generated 20 objects in about 21 minutes, about half the time of the original design. Now I am going to pull this back, and I'm going to delete that, put it back where we had it before. Now, it is also possible to use this flowchart as the basis for what we generate in AutoCAD and Inventor with the rest of the Factory Design Suite. I'm going to click on the factory objects over here, and I'm going to associate an asset with each of the operations and sources and processors in the flowchart. So the first thing I'm going to do is look up a mesh basket, which is going to represent the feeder here, just a simple basket there. I then want to look for some presses. So I've got a lot of presses here to choose from. We're going to use a punching press for each of these options. And I think I'm going to use another press here. Make sure I get the right one. For press C. We then need a rack. Many different shelves and racks to choose from, so we'll associate that with the buffer. And I've actually added some of my own user assets, and you can access your user assets via the cloud. So if you publish your assets to the cloud, you can use them here too. And I have an asset that'll simulate our palette with the boxes at the end of the process. Once we're satisfied with the flow, we can choose to export the simulation to a DWG. I'm going to save this as a DWG file, and then I'll open that inside of AutoCAD. Here you can see the process analysis drawing file open inside of AutoCAD. And the application is smart enough to know that it's supposed to use the actual factory asset to represent the source objects, the processor objects, the buffer objects, and so on. Well, now that I have it open inside of AutoCAD, it's very easy for me to sync this to Inventor. Now that we have a full 3D representation of our process, we can use the Factory Design Suite to add conveyors or material handling equipment, or we can adjust the placement of our options anywhere inside of the factory line we want to. I hope you can see how integral the Process Analysis 360 application is now to the Factory Design Suite. The next enhancement we're going to focus on is the ability to generate 2D assets directly from AutoCAD. With Factory Design Suite 2015, you can now use existing AutoCAD blocks to generate factory assets. This new feature also supports the automatic production of 3D representations of those two-dimensional assets. I've opened up my AutoCAD drawing for this example, and I'm going to zoom into this area. Now what you see on the screen are some conventional factory assets that we created from a previous example, and some conventional AutoCAD blocks. Here we have some AutoCAD blocks that represent some roller tables, and here is an AutoCAD block that represents a CNC machine. And the Factory Design Suite now allows me to use these conventional blocks and to publish three-dimensional assets. Now I've already created the assets for the roller tables here, so I'm going to delete that. I haven't yet created the asset for this CNC machine. So let me show you how that works. Up on the Factory tab, I'm going to select the Create Assets command. I'm then going to scroll down and find the asset, or the block, that I want to use. So here's the block that I'm interested in. I'm just going to use the default block name, but you do have the opportunity to change it. Now this is a very interesting option right here. You can actually choose to extrude the outer boundary of this block up into 3D during the asset publishing process. And I'm going to enter 60 inches here for that extrusion value. You also have the opportunity to add asset properties. So for instance, the title of the asset and a company name. I'm going to click the Publish command, and I'm going to choose to publish this asset to my user asset location. And I'll simply come over here to my asset browser and click Refresh. Now if I go into my user asset folder, I'll find the category where I'm storing all of my 2D assets. And now what I want to do is rebuild the roller tables in the CNC machine using factory assets. So I think real quickly I can drag this over. So here's that CNC machine now as a factory asset. We'll go ahead and drop that off. And let's go ahead and build the roller table in here as well. We'll bring in the junction. And very quickly I have reassembled my what were 2D blocks with now factory assets. Now to finish off this example, I simply want to sync my drawing back over to Inventor. If I come in and look at the assets that we just generated in AutoCAD, you can see their new 3D counterpart inside the Inventor environment. Another new enhancement for Factory Design Suite 2015 is the enhanced ability to add hyperlinks to your asset tags. With Factory Design Suite 2015, it's much easier to establish links in factory asset tags. The new functionality allows you to hide the majority of the actual link, creating an asset tag that's very functional yet easy to read. For this example, I've opened up Inventor and I'm going to zoom in on some of the assets we placed in a previous demonstration. And I want to add an asset tag to this press. So I'll start the asset tag command. And we use asset tags to establish a unique identifier in case we have, equipment that appears twice in the layout line like we do here. So it's very easy for me to come in and add a brass tag number. So we'll call it press 001A. Now the enhanced ability for hyperlinking actually occurs in this lower field. Now to keep things simple, I've already done the code here, and if you want to pause the video, you're more than welcome to and take a look at how I've got the code here. I've got some square brackets around the word details and vendor, and then in parentheses I have the actual URL to a picture of the actual press and the website for the press manufacturer. Now I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to paste it here. Now we'll go ahead and select our component and drop off the asset tag, and we'll click to place that. Now if I hover over the asset tag, you see that the information displayed in the asset tag is nice and neat. You don't see the entire URL, you basically just see the shortcut to it. So for instance, if I click details, a picture of the actual press will show up. And if I go back in and select the vendor information, it takes me directly to the website where we can purchase one of the presses. The next enhancement we're going to focus on is the new Asset Connect command. If you've ever generated an asset with many connectors, you know how frustrating it can be when you go to place that asset and it actually inadvertently snaps to a connector you didn't intend to. The new connect command allows for manual selection of connector points that may be in close proximity to each other. Now it's easy to select the exact connector you're looking for without worrying about accidentally snapping to a neighboring connector. Back in Inventor, I've added some vent to the project that we're working on. I'm going to zoom up to this connection right here, and I'm going to add a simple bend. Now this is actually a simple asset with two connectors, and when I go to connect it, I might get lucky that it snaps in the right direction, but chances are I might not. There's a lot of things Inventor can snap to, and sometimes the ability to snap to anything really gets in the way, and it makes it very difficult for me to place the asset exactly where I want it. So in this case, I'm just going to drop it off, and I'll hit escape and I won't place it. Now I'm going to use the new connect command. The connect command actually exposes the connectors in the file and allows you to select the two that you're looking for. So if I wanted to pick those two, you'd see that I turn the vent one way. I'll go ahead and hit escape, run the connect command again. I'll pick the other one, and you can see that it spins the right way. That command makes it so much nicer to place assets, especially in a situation where your asset is inadvertently snapping to other things. Factory Design Suite 2015 has enhanced the way elevated assets are projected. Previous releases of Factory Design Suite projected the asset footprint to the bottom of the asset during a sync to AutoCAD. Now elevated assets are projected to the factory floor during the AutoCAD sync. Back in Inventor, I want to focus on the duct we were generating in the previous example. Now I want to sync this back to AutoCAD. Now in the previous releases of Factory Design Suite, when you did a sync back to AutoCAD, the assets were projected downwards and the footprint of the asset always appeared on the bottom of the asset. So in this case, with the vent being overhead, in the previous release, the asset would be projected to the bottom of the asset, not the factory floor. Well, now you're going to see when I sync to AutoCAD, the asset is projected correctly. Now when I'm prompted to open this in AutoCAD, I'm going to select No. And over in the browser, I'm simply going to select all of my assets and take the visibility off of them so that you can see how the footprint was projected to the factory floor instead of the bottom of the asset. The 2015 release of Autodesk Factory Design Suite makes point clouds much more functional and easier to set up. New commands include the ability to navigate recap regions inside of Inventor. You can now easily create a point cloud plane, and you can measure from a point cloud plane to any given asset. You can also snap assets to point clouds. I'm going to start this part of the presentation in Autodesk Recap. Autodesk Recap is the tool we use to set up our point clouds before we bring them into Inventor. And what I have here is the point cloud for the corner of the building that we're working in. So if I were to spin this around, you can see that the building is currently full of CNC equipment. We need to basically replace this equipment in the project that we're working on and make better use of the space with our new design. Now what I need to do is really set this point cloud up before I bring it into Inventor. I need to remove the floor and the ceiling because those things are going to get in the way during our project. So to get things started, I am going to go over here and I'm going to change my view. I'm going to remove the perspective view and I'm going to set up on what is the front side of the building right here. Now I want to establish some regions of point clouds so that I can hide them. To do that, I'm going to come down to the window area and I'm going to use just a simple window selection. And the first region I want to set up is the ceiling. So I'm going to bring up just to right at the bottom of the roller door there, and I'm going to remove all of that. Now instead of erasing it, I'm going to create a new region. We'll call it ceiling. We'll pick OK. Now a color is automatically assigned to those particular objects. I'm just going to repeat this for the floor. I just want to take up a little bit of the point cloud at the floor, not a lot. Factory Design Suite, when we're in Inventor, gives me a very nice floor that I can use, and these points would be redundant. So again, I'm going to create a new region called the floor. We'll click OK. Now I can go over here to the Project Navigator, and I can come up and turn off the points for the ceiling and the floor. Now we can look inside and we can set up a new region for the equipment. So let me zoom out here. Again, we'll just use a regular window. Now I want to get rid of as much equipment as possible, so I'm going to just do a simple little window selection here. To add to that selection, I'm going to hold the Shift button down, and I'm going to pick everything else down here. I want to leave the stuff on the side wall, but basically I'm going to pick all of that. Now, if you want to remove stuff from your selection set, you hold the Alt button down, and there's a couple of columns here that it's important that I preserve those. Now that I have my selection set up, we'll simply create another new region called Equipment. We'll come over here to the Navigator, we'll turn those points off, and we'll take a look at our resulting point cloud. Now I have a nice clean point cloud that I can bring into Inventor for our project. Now I've opened up Inventor and I've inserted the point cloud into our current project, and I've placed it in the corresponding location on the building floor plan. Now the first thing I want to do is take advantage of those regions that we created in Autodesk Recap. And to do that, I'm going to go to the Manage tab and I'm going to use the new Navigator tool. We now have the ability to access the Navigator inside of the Inventor environment. And I'm simply going to come in and turn off the floor and the ceiling and the equipment that we established earlier. I'll click OK, and I have my nice clean point cloud to use for the remainder of my project. Now there are some other new enhancements to point clouds. We now have the ability to create a point cloud plane. So as an example, let's say that I need an axis in the corner of the room over here to measure from. Well, I can use the point cloud plane tool and simply select a group of points, and the plane is established. So we can do the same thing here. And then if I just want to activate the axis command, I can create an axis from the two planes. And now I have a nice axis right in the corner of the building so that I can measure or possibly constrain objects to. Now I'm just going to delete those. That work plane functionality is also accessible in the measure tools. So if I go to my measure tools, I want to measure the distance from the door here. Notice that the points are giving me a plane. And then for instance, I want to measure to the side of the press. And I get an immediate value, so you can actually measure using this functionality from an asset to a point cloud. Now, we can also now snap assets to point clouds. This is a very important enhancement. So I'm going to go back over here and I'm going to activate my asset browser, and I'm going to bring in a sink. This is a hand washing station that I created. Now, in the past, you see basically a result or a version of this right here. You've got a sink and you've got the soap dispenser, paper towel dispenser that hang on the wall. Now in the past, we've had to develop these wall-based assets with a landing surface on the floor. Well, now that I can actually snap to point clouds, we can now start developing point or wall-mounted assets. So let me bring in the sink station here for a minute. Let me show you what's going to happen. I'm going to bring it in, and as I go over and touch the point cloud, it's automatically going to snap to the wall. And this is really nice. Once I get the reposition command in place, I can then set it upright. And I can position it in where I'd like it, right on the wall. And I'll click Done. Now let me turn off the visibility of the point cloud and turn it back on so that it reestablishes itself. But there you can see what is basically a wall-mounted asset. And the ability to start generating wall-mounted assets in way of point clouds is a fantastic workflow addition to the Factory Design Suite. The bill of material functionality has also been enhanced for Autodesk Factory Design Suite 2015. In previous releases of the application, you could use Inventor's bill of material, but it didn't inherently recognize the difference in asset variations. Well, now it does. This command takes advantage of the Inventor bill of material functionality, so you can quickly create a list of equipment used in your factory layout. The ability to add additional information like cost, description, or even key parameters means you can use the bill of equipment to create cost roll-ups for your factory layouts. I'm back in Inventor, and I've replaced some of my roller table assets with some pallet conveyors that are actually standard with the Factory Design Suite. Now, let me go ahead and bring up my Factory Properties window, and I'm going to select this roller or pallet conveyor. And I want you to take a note here that the length of this is 6 feet. If I select this asset, which is the same asset, you'll notice that the length is 120 inches. Now, in the previous releases of Factory Design Suite, these two assets, even though they're different and have different lengths, would be recognized as the same asset by the bill of material. And the bill of material functionality for Factory Design Suite 2015 has been greatly enhanced so that now it recognizes this as two different assets by default. I'm going to select my bill of material, and I want you to notice immediately the inclusion of the key parameters in the bill of material. And it's this column of information that makes the distinction between asset variations. If I were to scroll down, you'll actually see the straight pallet conveyor appear twice with different key parameters. And that's a great enhancement to the application by itself. But we can also now edit this information if we choose to. In past releases of the software, and even the default version of Factory Design Suite 2015, assets are treated like library parts and they're read-only by default. But you can actually now toggle that on and off. If you go to the Factory ribbon, right beside Bill of Materials, you're going to see Asset Control. If I select that, I can choose to make my asset files writable. Now, nothing major happens right away, but when I go back into the Bill of Material, you'll see that we can now come in and make changes to the key parameters columns if we choose to. But I think more importantly, cost and description, those fields we can actually change to make a better bill of material or bill of equipment for our factory layouts. And you can also put them writable again or unwritable again if you want to set it back to the way it was. If I select Asset Control again, you'll see that I can restore the read-write only state or the read-only state and put it right back to the way it was initially. Now, of course, you can export your bill of material to an Excel spreadsheet if you choose to, if you want to include it in your AutoCAD drawings. But of course, the bill of material is also fully supported inside of Inventor's drawing environment. To demonstrate this, I'm going to start a new standard DWG, and I am a big fan of actually generating some of my 2D work inside of Inventor. I absolutely understand that the default method in Factory Design Suite is to generate the 2D work inside of AutoCAD, but I do like taking advantage of Inventor's drawing capabilities. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add my parts list. I'll go ahead and select OK, and I'm just going to drop it right here for this example. And I actually have some of my assets, some of my duct assets, I've already manually gone in and included the key parameters in the description of the asset. And if you don't know how to do that, I would really encourage you to contact your Imaginate Technologies support representative, and we can help you with that. So if you need to get the key parameters in the description, we'll be glad to help you do that. But I wanted to come in and activate the parts list, and I want to include those key parameters. To do that, I'm going to start a new property, and I'm simply going to type in key parameters. We'll click OK. And you can see that they're immediately added to the parts list. We'll go ahead and drag this off to the side to make up the parts list a little more manageable. And you can see how easy it is to get that information into a parts list that you can then export to Excel or possibly put into one of your AutoCAD drawings with your data. Very, very nice addition, and I really do like the fact that I can come in with the balloon command by default now, and I can start itemizing my assets with balloons, and even though this is the exact same asset, the variations are actually reflected in the bill of material. The sync experience between AutoCAD and Inventor has been enhanced with the 2015 release. The latest release makes it easy to align a layout project between Inventor and AutoCAD. By identifying an Inventor project file for each AutoCAD layout drawing, you ensure a more reliable and smoother sync experience. Inside of Inventor, I'm going to activate the Factory Options and the Templates tab. At the top, you'll see the default layout template that will be used every time you do a sync from AutoCAD to Inventor. So if you need to set up a specific template that's used for syncing between AutoCAD and Inventor, you can now make that option here. I'm going to jump into AutoCAD for a minute, and I'm going to right-click, go to the Options area, and I'm going to scroll over here to the Factory Assets tab. Now in this dialog, you'll have the option to set up a default project that you use every time you sync from AutoCAD to Inventor. This allows you to strictly control what project is used and what libraries are used for the assets that populate during the sync process. The final enhancement that we'll discuss in today's presentation is the support for FactoryCAD data inside of the Factory Design Suite. Now this feature is not fully implemented yet, but I do want to include it in today's presentation. When this feature is fully implemented, you'll be able to bring in FactoryCAD data as a DWG overlay inside of Factory Design Suite. You'll also be able to bring in FactoryCAD data and use the models as assets in the Factory Design Suite. Now the feature is not fully available yet. If you want to use it in the 2015 release, as of the time of this recording, you have to install some add-ons. So please make sure you understand that in order to use this feature, you have to install some special add-ons. If you have questions about this feature, please contact your Imaginate Technologies support representative. This is going to conclude the What's New presentation for Autodesk Factory Design Suite 2015. If you have any questions about content that was covered in today's presentation, please feel free to contact your local Imaginate Technologies account manager or support representative.